Hi, and welcome to Act on Mental Health. My name is Sean Hardy, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor based here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I'm really glad that you're here. This is a deep dive video on how ACT works with anger. And so it's in a workshop or training style format, and it's something that's meant for mental health professionals who are working with clients with anger, as well as clients who are working through anger themselves that you can benefit from this training. And so treat it like a training where you can pause, you can come back, or you can revisit it as often as you need to. Now, all of the PowerPoint slides that I'm going to be going through, as well as the downloadable handouts, those are going to be available on my website, seanhardy.com. So go ahead and grab those, and you can feel free to copy those, use them as you need. I love to have resources available to use like today if I'm working with a client. And if you find this kind of deep dive video helpful and you want to see more of this kind of content, please let me know in the comments that you really like this. And so if you want to like the video, subscribe, share it, that also helps this channel to get to help more therapists out there who are working with people with anger and how ACT or acceptance and commitment therapy can help. All right, so let's go ahead and jump on in. Now, we're going to explore how ACT helps clients who struggle with anger. And anger at what? Or anger at who? Well, many people struggle with anger, and sometimes it's in a couple different areas or one. So it could be anger towards themselves, or anger towards their partner or children, or maybe it's anger towards the world at large or world around them. And we're going to look at how ACT builds psychological flexibility so clients can respond with intention rather than react from anger alone. All right, so let's go ahead and get introduced to what is anger and how ACT helps. So let's start it off with a quote from Aristotle. Anybody can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person and to the right degree and at the right time and for the right purpose and in the right way, that is not within everybody's power. That is not easy. Anger is a natural emotion that everyone feels from time to time. It can serve as a powerful motivator for change, but it can also be destructive when it's not managed well. As I say in therapy, anger is the right emotion, but it's the wrong tool, meaning it gives us the right feedback that something needs to change or something's unfair, but it's often not the right tool. It can be destructive. It can lead to giving too much or too intense, and we can often say things that we later regret. Everyone has a biological instinct to react to life-threatening situations by going into the survival mode. Now, maybe you've heard this called the stress response or the fight or flight response before. But this survival mode works well when it's triggered in situations that are actually life-threatening, like if a bus is coming towards you, or maybe you're a soldier in combat. That's when you want to go into survival mode. However, survival mode doesn't work well in other situations. Now, the fight or flight response includes a heightened arousal, hostile thinking patterns, and a loss in the ability to self-monitor or other inhibitory processes. It's just act right now, immediately. And it results in behavior that's produced to respond to this perceived threat. Now, afterwards, you might realize it wasn't life or death and you reacted more strongly than you wanted to, but your fight or flight response or the survival mode was operating in the background and moving you into action. Now, this can happen really fast. So let's look at these 5 parts of anger so we can kind of break down what's happening. The first is the pre-anger feelings. Now, these are the emotions that are there preceding the anger, or maybe with the anger. If you've seen the diagram of the anger iceberg, you have anger on top, and then you have these secondary emotions that are a part of it. So it could feel like shame or guilt or stress, anxiety, maybe feeling hungry or tired or overwhelmed. Now, all of those could be potential pre-anger feelings, maybe even frustration or annoyance. So pay attention to what's happening before the anger really shows up in our behavior. The second is trigger thoughts. So these trigger the anger to be unleashed. So these could be thoughts that ignite anger that might be more all or nothing thinking or blaming kind of uh, thoughts. So you might think this person is wrong or I'm a victim here. Uh, this is so unfair. And that could trigger the anger to then be um, ignited. Third is bodily sensations. So, what's going on in the body? What is showing up? So, this might be physical sensations of anger, like a rapid heartbeat or maybe feeling hot to the touch or maybe tense. For me, I know I feel it right here in the neck and upper chest, or sometimes my head feels like it's just going to explode. It's crucial here to kind of understand what is going on in the body because then it can help you understand what part of the fight or flight is kicking in. The fourth part is impulse to act. So these would be the urges to react aggressively or maybe passively, maybe to suppress that anger so that you don't get in trouble and not express what needs to be expressed. Or it could be just unleashing it and letting them have it. You have these kind of impulses that just come in the moment. Like, I just want to do this. I want to punch the wall, or I want to really let them have it. Now, this is where this impulse can begin to be separated from the action itself. There's two things that are actually going on there. And then the fifth part is what we actually think about of anger, and that's the anger behavior. So this is the actual expression of anger, which can be aggressive, like raising your voice, shouting, or hitting, or it can be passive, like withdrawing or avoiding communication, or just ghosting and just being out of there. These are the anger behaviors that tend to create that destructiveness that we see anger do. Now, understanding these components could help us recognize where we can intervene and make different choices. So let's back up and kind of zoom out here and look at what ACT is and look at mindfulness and how that can help us to have that flexibility to choose a different response when anger shows up. Acceptance and committed therapy, or ACT, gets its name from its two core messages. Accept what is out of your personal control and commit to action that improves your life. Now, the aim of ACT is psychological flexibility, which is accomplished in three central ways. First is to be present, meaning to bring yourself into the here and now, which we call mindfulness, so you can react effectively to life in the moment. The only place you can act is now. The second is to open up. So we use psychological skills such as acceptance, diffusion, to deal with our painful thoughts and feelings without getting stuck in them. It helps us to give that option, almost like a third perspective of our experience, that we're having thoughts and feelings and we're not in our thoughts or feelings. So we learn to change our relationship to these painful experiences rather than continuing the futile attempts to control them. And then the third part is to do what matters. This is where we clarify what is truly important and meaningful to you, which we call values. And then we use that knowledge to guide, inspire, and motivate ourselves to change so we can change our lives for the better. When we think about anger, anger is all about values. It's usually a value conflict. What we feel is important is not what the other person feels is important, or maybe the world around us. Or maybe we're not living our values and there's a conflict within us and we become angry with ourselves. So this is ACT in its core and what it aims to do. Now, what about mindfulness? Well, I want to introduce mindfulness as the practice of purposely focusing your attention on the present moment and accepting it without judgment. It's not simply relaxation, but an opening up to your experience as it is. ACT focuses on experiential learning. So we come to learn through our own experience with these concepts. And so from time to time, I want to do some exercises that can help it to click in a different way. And so I want us to start here with a brief mindfulness exercise together. So if you're willing, you could try this with me right now. And we're going to just focus on our breath. So I want you to find a relaxed, comfortable, upright position in your chair. And I want you to keep your back upward or upright, but not too tight. And rest your hands wherever they're comfortable. For me, I'm resting them on my knees. I want you to notice your body from the inside. And I want you to begin to kind of feel the shape and the weight and touch of your body. What is it making contact with? What does it feel like around your body? What does it feel like within your body? Just let yourself relax and become curious about your body seated here. Now, I want you to focus on your natural flow of your breath. You don't need to change it. Just notice where you feel it in your body. How much room is it taking up inside of you? How much room is released as you breathe out? Now, perhaps you notice it in your belly or your chest or your throat, or maybe you notice it more in your face, your nostrils and your lips as the breath comes in and out. I want you to feel each breath one at a time. And as your mind starts to wander here, just gently acknowledge it with a soft kind of thought or wondering, kind of a curiosity, and redirect your attention back to your breath. So we'll just do this for about 30 seconds here. Just notice your breath. Notice where it's showing up. And notice your mind as it tries to drift off course. Just redirect it and return it to your breath. Yeah, just be patient with yourself and be kind here as you just kind of take a moment to be mindful, to be present, to be here. Now notice your body being here and just let yourself relax more deeply and open appreciation for doing this practice today, for taking time to be here and now. And when you're ready, if you have your eyes closed, you can open them back up and just join me here today. Now, I want to ask you, is this different than what you would normally do? And if so, how? Well, what did you notice here? What was your mind doing during this exercise? And was it difficult to remain on the task? If so, think about the difficulties. What stopped you, or what made it difficult to concentrate on? Was it your thoughts? Or was it your body, or maybe feelings? For me, I'm kind of doing this around lunch, and I'm starting to realize I'm hungry as I was doing this. What did you notice? So this is the curiosity that I want you to experientially learn. So we're going to step back into anger, and we're going to look at a few things here as far as the costs and assessing anger. So let's explore the costs of unchecked anger. While anger can provide short-term relief, it can also lead to long-term consequences in relationships, career, and health. Chronic anger can increase the risk of heart disease, leading to social isolation, and can harm your emotional well-being. Clients may not realize anger as anger, so it may be worthwhile to provide a questionnaire before confronting possible anger problems. And that's our handout number 1, is the anger questionnaire. Now, this tool can help assess current relationships with anger and serve as a baseline to track changes. Now, when assessing the costs of anger, I'm reminded of a quote by Scott Fitzgerald. He said, "One should be able to see things as hopeless and yet be determined to make them otherwise." Anger can provide those short-term benefits, but it can often come with significant long-term costs. And these are some things that can feel hopeless to a client at first because they've always just known that anger as being there since they were young. But they can begin to have a different relationship with anger as they determine to make this shift that ACT helps with. So let's look at anger payoffs. Now, you may not have thought about this. You kind of maybe just see the costs, but there are payoffs to anger. So think about some of those payoffs. Some anger behaviors have positive effects, such as discharging anger. Acting out can reduce short-term stress, making us feel less worry, frustration, and physical pain. It can also help us to hide emotional pain. Anger masks pre-anger feelings, which can be uncomfortable. Now, another payoff is that it gets attention. And maybe you would deny that all day long that you're trying to get attention, but it does raise attention to your cause or your value. And people often listen when we're angry. Another payoff is that it's punishment or revenge. Now, this can feel satisfying in the short term, finally letting them have it. Telling your boss off, telling your partner how they really make you feel. It can have a punishment or revenge effect. And lastly, anger can have that payoff of influencing others. In chaotic families, anger can be used to get what we want. It gives us that passion to be determined, to be stubborn, to go after what we want. And others may just acquiesce to what we want. We can influence them. So there are some payoffs to anger. Now let's assess some of the costs of anger. Now, despite these benefits, anger does have significant costs. So there's a trade-off here. The first one here is interpersonal costs. So they can damage relationships with family, friends, and colleagues. And I've heard of anger referred to as psychological nudity, where you kind of lift off your mask, so to speak, and let people really know where you're at. And it's like you can't undo that. People see your nakedness of your emotional life. So it can have interpersonal costs. It can also have career costs, conflicts at work affecting performance and opportunities. It can also have health costs. Anger has been linked to issues like hypertension, heart disease, and substance abuse. And if you're interested in a psychological assessment for that, there's something called the STAXI, STAXI, and it's an anger assessment tool that helps you to determine if anger is a state, trait, and if it's chronic. And also you can help identify if they suppress anger, they express it, or if there's aggressive parts of anger. But that STAXI shows the correlation between anger, chronic anger, and health issues. Another cost is energy costs. Anger, it does energize for the moment, but it drains us and leaves us exhausted. We expend ourselves in that when we give way to anger. And finally, anger has an emotional cost. It can lead to loneliness and decreased social support. It can give us exactly what we don't want, which may feel like abandonment. It may feel like, a sense of isolation. So those are some payoffs and costs of anger. Now there is another handout number 2, which is the cost of anger behavior log. And this is going to help clients to track how anger affects them personally throughout time. So go ahead and utilize that with clients as you see fit. Now, one of the core problems here that ACT addresses is control as the problem. Now, why controlling anger can be problematic? You would think that it would be helpful, but it does the exact opposite. It ends up harming. Now, many of us use control strategies to make anger feelings go away, but these often leave us with unresolved anger and underlying emotions. And there's this illusion of control. Control strategies work temporarily. They keep painful feelings at bay, but in the long run, you're left with the same anger. Now, there is another option. I'll get to that in a moment. When I come into my office, externally it may be a mess, and internally I may feel unprepared or maybe a little anxious. But I can use a control strategy and clean up the office and make it tidy, and that can have an effect on my emotional life. It can make me more at ease, more at peace, more prepared. And we tend to think that control is going to get us what we want internally. So if you're using anger because there's conflict, you may want peace. But using anger as a control strategy to control other people or circumstances or ourselves actually ends up doing the opposite. It doesn't give us that peace. It creates a sense of war or an aftermath of war. So there has to be a different way about it. Now, external versus internal control. Now, externally, we solve problems by finding the cause and eliminating it. Now, if you're hungry, you eat. If you dislike something, you avoid it. However, these strategies do not work for internal experiences like thoughts and feelings. If you dislike what you're thinking, can you get rid of it? If you dislike your feeling, can you walk away from it? I'm going to give you a couple exercises just to kind of show you what I'm talking about here. First is the numbers exercise. Now, I want you to commit these 3 numbers to memory. All right, 1, 2, 3. That's it. Now, I don't want you to forget them. Now, if you're struggling right now, you can replace them with different numbers like 4, 5, 6. That you can try to do something to control it and just say, okay, I'm going to forget 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to replace it with 4, 5, 6. But the problem is when I ask you where are the numbers, even if you try to replace it with 4, 5, 6, you're going to tell me 1, 2, 3. You're going to know that. And this demonstrates a language rule that once it's in, it's in. And if you don't want it, you've got it. Another exercise I can show you this is the chocolate cake exercise. Now, for the next 15 to 30 seconds, I want you to try not to think of a warm, delicious chocolate cake. All right, so we're going to start right now. So don't think of a delicious chocolate cake. All right, talk to me. Were you successful? Were you able to just put it out of your mind? Now, maybe you're creative and you're able to distract yourself. Okay, don't think of the delicious chocolate cake. But even when you're trying not to think of it, you say the rule, oh, chocolate cake. Don't think of the chocolate cake. Now, notice how our minds are tricky and how this applies to suppressing angry thoughts. You can try not to be angry. You can try to put it out, but it's still there. And sometimes it comes back even more intense. Let's try this with our feelings. We'll do a feelings exercise or two. First, I want you to imagine sitting on a dunk tank platform, and beneath you it's a tank full of hungry sharks, and you're hooked up to a polygraph machine, and it reads anxiety. So if anxiety shows up at all, it's going to dunk you into that tank. Now, would you be able to pass that polygraph test? Probably not. You probably have anxiety because you're like, I might fall in. Now, let's try this with positive emotions because those are also hard to control. Now, if I offered you $10 million to fall in love with the next person that you see, could you do it on command? Think about that. Could you, anybody, coffee shop or at the hospital, anybody, the next person that you saw, could you make yourself feel in love with them for $10 million? The point is that controlling emotions is challenging, and struggling with our thoughts and emotions only adds suffering on top of everyday pain. You simply cannot control everything externally and internally. Now, there's things we can control. I mean, you can control your actions. You can control, in some parts, how you respond to the world around you. This is called our response ability, and it empowers you to focus on handling your emotions and interactions as best as you can control them. So we can control our bodies, our words, our attitudes, but we can't control others, the world around us, or really what we feel at any given time or what thought might show up at any given time. Now let's look at how our minds create anger. Our minds are powerful tools designed to evaluate everything around us, helping us to stay safe. However, these evaluative habits can also lead to unnecessary pain and anger. Now let's look at the evaluative mind. Our minds, they assess situations as pleasurable, painful, good, or bad. It's got a judgment for everything. And this evaluation happens quickly, often without us noticing. And while this ability keeps us safe, it can also create problems when our mind manufactures pain that isn't necessary. So think of this as thoughts as bridges from events to feelings. We often think events, they cause our emotions, but our powerful minds actually add a layer of interpretation. The same event can lead to different emotions depending on our beliefs. For example, imagine someone doesn't respond to your message. One person might feel ignored and hurt, while another might think the person's busy and feel fine. Our beliefs bridge the gap between events and feelings. Now let's look at anger trigger thoughts and how this works with those. There's certain thoughts that tend to trigger anger, and it's often with a pattern. So feeling harmed or victimized and believing the other person is wrong. Common anger trigger themes include people ignoring your needs, people are inconsiderate or impolite, how rude, people are selfish or thoughtless, people are unfair or unjust. These are some patterns that typically trigger that anger. So let's look at how thoughts create or intensify anger. So this evaluative mind does a couple things. First, it judges. So we have this judgment. Our minds judge others as right or wrong. This turns preference into rigid rules, using words like should and ought to. And with unchecked judgment, we compare reality to unrealistic standards, leading to frustration and anger. The second way it creates and intensifies anger is its cause and effect. It assumes intent and blaming. Our minds seek to understand cause and effect. We want to know why, and often assumes others' intentions or their motives. Now, this mind reading leads to misunderstandings and blames others for our pain or whatever shows up for us. Now, blame doesn't undo the past or fix pain, but it keeps us stuck. And the biggest reason is we assume that their motives are bad. We assume they're being selfish or unfair, inconsiderate, whatever you fill in the blank. The third way that it creates or intensifies anger is labeling, which could be toxic and global labels. I'll kind of separate those. Now, our minds categorize people and situations often negatively. So these global labels justify our anger and resentment, affecting communication and relationships. Now, this could be like political, it could be social, it could be religious, but those labels we give people tend to bring them into a category to where we feel justified in our anger toward them. Now, let's look at diffusion as an alternative. This is where ACT helps with anger. Now, we've explored how the mind creates anger, and you might think, okay, I get the anger part. The way to avoid anger is to stop having trigger thoughts. But if you remember our previous example, you'll know it's very hard to stop or change our thoughts. There is no delete button on our minds. Instead, we're going to look at ways to disengage from what our minds do automatically. In ACT, we call this cognitive diffusion. So rather than fusing with or getting stuck to our thoughts, we step back and we see thoughts that are simply creations of our mind. We don't need to treat them as reality. Now, a simple example of this is to imagine, a sticky thought as being largely printed on your hand, such as stupid. That's a very painful thought. So if I feel stupid, it's like it's right there in front of me. It's all that I can see around me. This is an example of fusion. And when we're fused with that thought of stupid, it starts to lead to behavior as we react to that. And so ACT helps us to cognitively defuse, which kind of helps us to have it out here to say, oh, I see that thought. I see that feeling, instead of being literally in that thought or being one with it. We don't need to treat these thoughts or feelings as reality themselves. They are a creation of our mind. Now, there's a handout number 3 with ways to diffuse from thoughts that can be very helpful. And I'll kind of briefly go over a few examples of these. You can see thoughts as spam email that just show up in your folder. You don't have to click on every thought and to give it space to focus on it. These emails, I guess, got one yesterday of a phishing email. And so I could kind of tell as a phishing email because it said that I ordered something when I didn't. And so there's a button there that I can put phishing on it, and then it gets sent to our IT department. Our thoughts are a lot like that. There's thoughts that are like spam that just kind of show up, but I don't have to put them in my priority mail. So you can start to treat them like spam email. Now you can remember that the mind is not you. The mind is a tool that isn't always helpful. It's generating all these thoughts. You can also diffuse by saying the thoughts out loud. Now, sometimes when we say the same things over and over, it kind of loses its meaning. You can kind of just start to hear it as sounds or gibberish. And you can take any word, like a popular one done in ACT is milk. Saying milk for 30 seconds as fast as you can. After a while, it sounds like you're talking through a fan. It's just noise. You start to see it as a blurring of words. You can do the same thing with anger. Say anger for 30 seconds as fast as you can, and you'll start to just hear it as sounds. It loses its punch. It loses its stickiness. Now, it sounds a little strange, but those things can help to loosen up so we can take down that thought. You can also categorize thoughts. So instead of getting caught up in what you're thinking, you can try to step back and observe what your mind's doing. You could look at each thought and category it is, like, oh, that's a worry thought, or that's a judgment thought. Oh, there I am planning again. Oh, I'm reminiscing. I'm going back. You can begin to ask yourself, what is my mind up to? And try to find the right label or the category. You kind of put it in buckets. Oh, now my mind is having a blank thought, an anger thought. Oh, that's what it's doing. See how it's separate from ourselves? It's what the mind is actively doing, and we can kind of diffuse ourselves. There's a few others that you can do, like labeling your thoughts. Like, I notice that I'm having the thought. Oh, here is the thought. It can help to place it outside of yourself. It's good to a good way to do this is to treat your mind as a separate person. Now, for some people, they might label their mind as or just say mind, or maybe like coach, or critic, or you can give it a person's name. Like, what does Susie have to say about this? Like, you don't have to always have your mind agree with you. You can kind of have it like as outside of yourself, as like kind of like a third person, and kind of take its opinions into account when it's helpful, like you would a friend. You don't take everything your friend says as, oh, I have to do that. Good exercise, and if I was with you, I might do this in session. It's kind of fun. Not every client is willing to do this, but you just have that client stand up, and we're going to take turns going on a walk, and we're going to take our mind for a walk. So I'm going to walk behind you, and you're going to walk in front of me. And I want you to be your mind. So whatever your thoughts say, just say those out loud as we walk around the room. And then we switch, and I'm now their mind. And, I begin to kind of say random thoughts. So it's like taking your mind for a walk. And it can be kind of a fun way to kind of diffuse from what your mind says. Another one, turning the hand. I don't do this one as much, but it's you can have like a thought, like here's this thought, I'm stupid. And just like you're holding a stone. Oh, here's the thought, I'm stupid. And then you just turn your hand over like you're letting go. And you say, there's a thought, and I let it go. And that can be helpful to kind of physically feel the sensation of letting it go. You can ask yourself, how helpful is this thought? Is this thought helping me to go in the direction I want to go? You could think back on your goals and values. You could look at the consequences of being your thoughts rather than having them. And you can simply allow the thought to be there and keep moving if it's not helping you. You can also do some mental observations of thoughts. So there's a lot of visualization exercises out there, like watching your thoughts, like you're on a bridge watching a parade go underneath of you, and each float has a thought on it. You can use the leaves on the stream, where your thoughts sit on leaves as you sit by the shore and watch them go by. You can view thoughts like words on a teleprompter, or clouds in the sky, or trains on a car. There's really anything you can be creative with it, but it's a way to kind of mindfully observe what's happening inside of you using a visualization. These diffusion techniques help us create distance from our thoughts, allowing us to respond rather than react. And practicing these techniques and noticing how they change our relationship with thoughts and emotions can be very transformative. When you start to get it, you realize, I am not my thoughts. I am the one having these thoughts. All right, let's look at acceptance as the antidote to anger. Nathaniel Branden said the first step toward change is awareness. The second step is acceptance. So let's define acceptance. Acceptance means taking an open stance toward our thoughts, emotions, and sensations. It's not resignation or giving in. Instead, it's about willingness, being open to experiencing the emotions that are there as they come. So acceptance is not resignation or giving in. It's not admitting defeat or failure, and it's not just tolerating unnecessary pain. Acceptance is being open to one's whole experience, and it's a choice and an action, not just a feeling. And acceptance is something that requires practice. And a good way to view acceptance is through the tug of war exercise. And if you've been around ACT, you probably know what this one is. But it's imagining that you're in a game of tug of war with a monster representing your anger. And between you and the monster is this bottomless pit. And if you lose, you fall in. So you pull with all of your strength, but the monster never tires. Your arms grow weary, and you're unable to focus on anything else. The harder you pull, the closer you get to the pit. Now, what if the solution isn't to win, but to drop the rope? By dropping the rope, you stop struggling and free yourself to focus on what truly matters. Now, for many people, their anger or whatever issue, it becomes their life. Their life is about the struggle. And in ACT, we see the struggle as the problem. The struggle is what keeps us tied to playing that game. But this is a game we don't have to win. In fact, we don't have to play it at all. We can learn to let go of the rope. Now let's look here at 4 qualities of mindful acceptance. I want to look at what this looks like as we go about doing this. Because I have a lot of people ask me in a session like, okay, I get the idea of letting go, but what does that look like practically? So this is kind of what it looks like. First, it's paying attention. So we're paying attention in the present moment, and it can be challenging due to the distractions from the world around us and within ourselves. Mindful attention means noticing what's happening with gentle curiosity by learning to pay attention fully and without defense. And we liberate ourselves from the habits of the mind and connect with the world as it truly is. But we have to pay attention to it. It's kind of like when you buy a new car. Uh, Before you bought the car, or maybe it's a used car, you maybe saw the car occasionally. And you're like, I'd love to have that car. But once you buy the car, you see it everywhere, don't you? It's like everybody has that car now. And in fact, they have your particular color of car. Before you didn't notice it, but now you see it everywhere. Well, this is what happens when we become mindful in our attention. We begin to see it everywhere. We see acceptance everywhere. All these opportunities to let go of the rope. Second is to pay attention on purpose. Paying attention requires an ongoing commitment. With numerous distractions, even experienced mindfulness practitioners find it difficult to maintain their focus indefinitely. But when we notice we're distracted, we must simply recommit to being present over and over again. So it's that intentionality of refocusing when we get distracted. Third, in the present moment. So paying attention on purpose in the present moments. And our minds, they often wander to the past, replaying mistakes or injustice, or just nursing old wounds. And we can also go to the future, where we anticipate dangers that may never happen. And while reflecting on the past and planning for the future have their place, focusing on the present moment can reduce unnecessary suffering. By staying present, we gain more accurate information about our current experience, allowing for a more effective response. So it's learning to be in the here and now, because this is the only time that we can act. So the fourth here is non-judgmentally. So we're going to pay attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. Now, non-judgmental awareness is often the hardest to achieve and requires ongoing practice because our minds naturally judge everything as good and bad, right and wrong, or fair and unfair. It's that evaluative mind that's just going to work constantly. And this helped our ancestors survive. By constantly judging can prevent us from experiencing life fully, though. Gradually learning to observe without judgment frees us to accept our experiences as they are. We stop viewing ourselves or others or the world as the problem. We start to just see it as it is, non-judgmentally. Now, let's look at a tool for mindful acceptance called STOP. So when you feel anger arising, use the STOP acronym to guide your response. So S stands for stop. So pause whatever you're doing or saying. This interruption can help you break the automatic cycle of anger. So stop. T is for taking a breath. So take a deep breath to create space between your anger urges and behavior. This moment of pause can help calm your mind and body, allowing you to respond more effectively. Take 2 or 3 breaths if you need to. O is for observe. So observe what you're feeling. Approach your thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations with willingness, gentleness, and curiosity. Notice what's happening inside you without judgment. This will be something where you begin to expand it as you learn how to do this. P is for pick a behavior. So choose a behavior that is different from your automatic anger responses. So if no specific behavior comes to mind, try something simple and opposite to acting out or suppressing anger. So here's some ideas that you can do, and I would recommend having pre-choice choices. Okay, so pick the behavior in advance, not in the moment. So these are some that I think would be helpful. So instead of having that angry face of like I'm uncomfortable, try smiling. Shift your focus from anger to something more positive. Try speaking softly. Instead of raising your voice, do the opposite and lower your voice to reduce the tension. Instead of getting tense and stressed, try relaxing. Release tension in your body through deep breathing or stretching or muscle relaxation, holding your hands for 5 seconds and then releasing it. Okay. Opening up your mouth for 5 seconds and then closing it. Like having something to kind of relax your body. Try to disengage. So step away from the situation instead of attacking. Okay, so if you're more of a fight response, disengage. Do the opposite. And if you're a disengaged person, lean in. Stay present. Lastly, you can empathize. Try to understand the other person's perspective rather than judging them. Notice that you're evaluating and judging them, and try to understand, what is it like to be them? What are they seeing that I'm not? How could they come to this decision? What are some things that maybe I'm missing here? Just being curious can cause some doubt, which can help your sense of certainty and anger to be loosened so that you don't just automatically follow it. Handout number 4 is the willingness practice log. And so willingness involves taking an open, accepting stance toward our thoughts, emotions, and body sensations. So it's about embracing kindness, playfulness, softness, or curiosity in our approach to life. Willingness is an on-off kind of experience. And so I'm going to help you kind of to do this with the practice log, and I'll show you how that works. So first, you're going to choose a focus. So each day you can identify one thought, feeling, or body sensation on which you choose to practice willingness. Even if it's just for a few moments, this practice can help you become more aware and accepting of your experiences. Second, track your experience. So write down what you noticed during your practice. Did your perspective shift? How did it feel to approach the experience with willingness? So go ahead and try that and see how that helps your client to practice willingness. Now let's look at self as context. And I want to read a quote from Mark Nepo from his book of Awakening. We waste so much energy trying to cover up who we are when beneath every attitude is the want to be loved, and beneath every anger is a wound to be healed, and beneath every sadness is the fear that there will not be enough time. So what is self as context? Now, in everyday language, we often talk about the mind without recognizing its two distinct elements. We have the thinking self and the observing self. The thinking self generates thoughts, beliefs, memories, judgments, fantasies, and plans. It's constantly active, shaping how we perceive the world. The observing self, on the other hand, is the aspect of us that is aware of whatever we're thinking, feeling, sensing, or doing in any moment. It's the part of us that observes our thoughts and feelings without getting caught up in them. The observing self is the concept that we are not the content of our experience. We are not our thoughts, feelings, sensations, or images, or memories. By accessing this psychological space, we can become conscious of our own unconscious. It's a place from which we can observe our experience without being caught up in it. There's some advantages to this observing self view. First, it's a more helpful perspective. It's recognizing a self that is larger than any transitory phenomena and allows us to diffuse from troubling thoughts and feelings. Like, I'm bigger than whatever I'm feeling in this moment. It also has the advantage of pain management. Experience a place inside of you where no matter how great the pain is, it cannot harm you. It's kind of like the ocean above has all these waves and it can be bothered by all the storms. But underneath, deep in the ocean, it's calm and still. So it has the observing self allows us to manage our pain in a similar way, that there's always a part of us that can be still and serene. It also has the advantage of conscious, flexible choices. Now, from this space, thoughts and feelings do not control our actions. This facilitates conscious, flexible choice and helps us to respond rather than react. And when you think about it, people cannot make me feel anything unless I give them the power to make me feel that way. I can have feelings show up in me, and maybe they're a part of that. Sure, I can have a reaction, but I don't have to feel anything. There's that power is mine alone to give. And we have this observing self. You start to realize that I am on the throne of my own life and my own emotions, my own thoughts, and nobody else is in charge of that arena. That domain is mine. Next, let's look at some values. Now, as we consider the concept of self as context, it's important to also reflect on the role of values in guiding our actions and decisions. Values give our lives direction, meaning, and purpose. By aligning our actions with our values, we can move away from emotion-driven behavior and focus on what really matters. We can get in contact with our values. Now, there's a need for values. As we've been working to decrease the influence of our thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations, you might wonder what guides our actions if we're not driven by these internal events. Well, the answer is our values. When our lives are guided by values, we choose. We are in control, and we are no longer at the mercy of impulsivity. Values help prioritize our energy and efforts toward things that are meaningful and fulfilling. They give us a sense of purpose and help us to make decisions that are aligned with our true selves, what we're aiming to be in our life, how we want to feel about ourselves, what is important, what matters. So values and acceptance in commitment therapy, or ACT, are defined in a unique way that emphasize their role as constant sources of direction. So here's how ACT defines values. First, values are never ending. Values are like the directions on a compass. Now, if you follow a compass heading east, you never actually arrive at a place called east. Similarly, you never achieve your values. They are continuous guides. For example, if you value being a good parent, there's always more that you can do. My son is 15 years old. I've got a 10-year-old, almost 10-year-old, and a 5-year-old daughter. And I'm never done being a good parent. I'm always trying to be a good parent. Even when they have kids and I'm a grandparent, I will still be valuing being a good parent. The moment you take a step in the direction of your values, you are living according to them. And when you misstep, you can immediately change your course. There's no all or nothing thinking as with goals. You either did it or you didn't. Goals are milestones in your value direction, or like in an itinerary sense, they're places that you're stopping along the way, but they're not destinations. Values are not destinations. Our goals serve the larger purpose of our values. Secondly, you get to pick your values. Your values are personal and not subject to right or wrong judgments. They are not dictated by others, and you can change them at any time. Values are like our taste in pizzas. There's no right or wrong preference. Now, I know there can be some debate on whether or not you put pineapple or anchovies on pizzas. But people like different things. I like supreme pizza. I like mushroom on my pizza. I like black olives, but I don't like green olives. I like cheese pizza. So different people like different things, and values are in some way, they're self-chosen. Your values should be owned by you, even if they don't exactly align with others. Third is that opportunities are there to live your values, and they're everywhere. Now, we can live our values in any situation, whether at work, at home, or in everyday activities. For instance, I can live my value of being helpful to others regardless of where I am or how I feel. Values can be expressed in happiness, frustration, or even exhaustion, and even anger. I can continue to live my values, whatever it is that I'm feeling and thinking. By clarifying and choosing our values, we empower ourselves to live more authentically and meaningfully. Our values guide us through life's challenges and keep us aligned with what truly matters. In handout number 5, I have the peak moments exercise. And it has a really, really cool way of going through our values by thinking about those really top moments of our lives and what was the value there. It can help people to better understand what might be their chosen values. Now, I threw this in here not because I think it's important, but it's important when it comes to anger and healing from anger. As we connect with our values, it's important to consider the role of forgiveness in freeing ourselves from the past and embracing a more peaceful life. Forgiveness is one of the more elegant forms of willingness, and it's offering us the opportunity to let go of old hurts. But it's also one of the most controversial subjects that I've encountered in counseling. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's people giving up their power over somebody who wounded them. And it's also giving up our power over ourselves and moving on with our life from a hurt. Now, understanding forgiveness. Many people who struggle with anger problems are fighting old battles. They're hoping to alleviate the hurt that started them. Now, forgiveness is often misunderstood as changing one's judgments or evaluations. It's as if saying, "Now, I used to think you were wrong, but now I've changed my mind." It can also be perceived as emotional avoidance, forgetting old angers and hurts or excusing and denying wrongdoing, saying it is what it is and just moving on. However, forgiveness can be approached more positively. The word forgive suggests giving that which came before. It's repairing what was lost. In this sense, forgiveness is not earned. It's free, and it's only the gift that you can give. The Latin word or the root is gratis, meaning free. And it highlights that forgiveness is a gift. And a gift to who? Well, it's a gift to others, but it's also a gift to ourselves. It's not just a gift to the wrongdoers. It's something that we can give ourselves. And if we cannot give the grace that went before wrongdoing, life's injustice become permanent. Your life becomes about that event. And through our actions, not the perpetrators. It becomes something that affects us and our relationships and people that had nothing to do with it. And it's the perpetrator is not the one getting punished. It's the victim. So consider the costs. What are the costs of holding on to resentment? Does it ever bring the peace and satisfaction that you're hoping for? And who does it ultimately hurt? So let me know your responses in the comments. The hook metaphor, I think, is a good visual. Now, when hurt by another person's actions, it's like being caught on a fishing hook. We often try to get revenge by making them feel the same pain that we did. Unfortunately, this keeps us both on the hook. If we're invested in keeping the other person on the hook, we're 100% blocking our own way off and our own way out. So forgiveness is letting go. It's letting the person off the hook so you can free yourself and get off the hook. It does not require changing how you feel or think about the situation. It could still be very hurtful. It could be wrong and unfair and all the things that it was. It's a choice, though, to let go and move on with your life so that you can heal, so you don't have to be in anger anymore. Handout number 6 is the forgiveness log, and that's something that it can help you use this as a tool to track progress and letting go of resentment and embracing forgiveness. All right, now we've come to committed action. And I want to read a quote by David White. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing close in, the step you don't want to take. Now, often that's telling people what you need. And that's where assertive communication can be a very powerful tool that allows us to express our needs and emotions clearly and confidently. It is characterized by the belief that everyone has the right to express their own legitimate needs. Through assertive communication, we can stand up for ourselves while respecting others and leading to a healthier relationship and also reduced anger. But it's hard. It's the hardest step, but it's necessary. Assertive communication is a style that enables you to say what you want, express your feelings, and stand up for your rights, and also set appropriate limits. Unlike aggressive communication, which can be confrontational, assertive communication fosters mutual respect and understanding. Now, there's a lot of great tools out there to do this. The one that I like is the DEESC script, or DEESC script. The script stands for describe, express, empathize, specify, and consequences. So I'll break down these quickly. So describe is describing the behavior situation as completely and objectively as possible. Focus on the facts without adding judgment. For example, the last time my brother George came to visit, I cleaned the entire house all by myself. Express your feelings and thoughts about the situation or behavior. Use I statements to convey your perspective without placing blame. For example, as a result, I felt exhausted and angry. Then empathize. Verbally empathize with the other person. Acknowledge their perspective or about the situation. For example, I know you've been tired from working so much. That must be hard. Then specify. Specify the behavior or outcome you would prefer. Clearly state your needs or requests. For example, I would like the two of us to work on cleaning the house. And then the consequences. So specify the consequences of the proposed action, so both the positive and the negative. For example, if we both work together, the house will be cleaned up faster and we can all enjoy his visit together. Or if we work together, I will be less tired and irritable. You can say what will be added or what will be taken away or removed if this action were to be taken. There's also another handout called the Committed Action Log. And I'll go through what the committed actions look like here in a moment, but just know that could be helpful to log those committed actions. So definition of committed action. A committed action involves taking effective steps guided by your values. While knowing your values is crucial, it's through action that your life becomes rich, full, and meaningful. Values-guided action brings about a range of thoughts and feelings, pleasant and painful. Committed action means doing what it takes to live by your values, even when it brings discomfort. So here's a few steps to consider for committed action. First, choose a domain for change. Identify an area of your life that you want to prioritize for change. Second, select values. Determine the values you want to pursue in this domain. Third, develop goals. Create goals guided by your values. Fourth, take mindful action. So act with awareness and intention. And fifth, take each step no matter how you feel. Commit to action despite discomfort or resistance. So let's look at goals. There is a place for goals in ACT. It's not just values, but it's understanding that we're not just checking off a value or a goal. We are moving toward a certain way of being in the world. So this is where SMART goals can help. So SMART goals stand for specific, meaningful, achievable, realistic, and time limited. So these are some things that take, just when you're considering a one statement goal. I usually like to make mine one sentence. And so I want to specify, I want to clearly define what I want to achieve. I want to make it meaningful, so ensure that this goal aligns with my values. And I want to make it achievable. I want to set goals that are within my reach. And I'll make it realistic. So ensure that my goal is obtainable and within my control. And then I want to make it time limited. So that means setting a clear time frame for achieving the goal. So identify steps and arrange them logically. So once you've settled on your goals, focus on the steps to achieve them. So break down your goals. So start with short-term goals and then divide it into smaller, more manageable steps. And then put them in a logical order. So determine the sequence of the steps and what needs to happen first. So for example, if your goal is changing jobs and become a manager in a larger corporation, we'll break it down into specific actions like checking for job postings, networking, updating your resume, and applying to new employers or doing some interviews. There's steps in the process, and you can start to identify those. And the small steps matter. Learning to take small steps are crucial. So avoid getting too focused on these long-term goals, as this can pull you out of living in the present. Instead, focus on the steps you can take now. So make a commitment and take the step. So commit to step 1. Are you willing to accept the discomfort that comes with the change? Are you ready to commit to your values and the changes that they entail? Secondly, set a day and time. Commit to a specific time to begin step 1. Regardless of how you feel, take action. Change requires doing something different. And the third is a public commitment. People are more likely to follow through on a public commitment when they share their commitment aloud. It increases the accountability and they're more likely to follow through. So how are you more motivated? That's kind of the idea of these. The last thing we'll kind of end on here is driving your bus, driving your life bus. So I want you to imagine yourself as a driver of a bus called My Life, and it's headed north toward Value Mountain. Let's say your value is compassion, or maybe another personal value that resonates with you. Along the way, you pick up some unruly passengers. They're blaming, critical, anger-related thoughts that your mind generates. Other passengers include feelings of pain and hurt that you've encountered in an earlier exercise. These passengers are loud and persistent, seemingly bullying and frightening you as you drive on your chosen route. At some point, you realize that while you were trying to argue with those passengers and calm them down, you missed a road sign and took a wrong turn. Now you find yourself about an hour off course, heading south. So what do? Well, you may feel lost, but you're not without direction. You could stop the bus and focus on getting your passengers in line, but what would that cost? What would the cost be to you? Thoughts and feelings cannot prevent you from turning your bus around and heading north again towards your value mountain, unless you give them that power. If reaching your value mountain is important to you, then your task is to stay in the driver's seat of your bus and continue driving north, no matter how much noise those passengers make. Now, by staying focused on your values and keeping your eyes on the road, you can navigate through distractions and challenges. Remember, you have the power to choose your direction, and you don't need to let those passengers dictate your journey. You simply take them for the ride. Now, before we close, I want to give credit to 2 excellent resources that inform much of the content in today's workshop. The first is Act on Life, Not on Anger, a book by Efert, McCade, and Forsyth. The second is the ACT Workbook for Anger by Robin Walser and Manuela O'Connell. Both of these books go much deeper into applying ACT with anger, and they're wonderful guides for therapists and clients. If you're looking for ACT protocols, treatment guidance, and professional training materials, I highly recommend contextualscience.org. It's the Association for Contextual Behavioral Science. And as a member myself, I found it to be a really valuable resource for clinical learning and support. And of course, you can download all the slides and handouts from this workshop at SeanHardy.com. And I'd really love to hear from you. So take a moment and comment below. How do you currently work with anger in therapy? And would you like to see more of this deep dive training content like this in the future? I read every comment, and your feedback helps shape what I create next. So thank you again for being here, and I'm honored to support you as you support others. And remember, your journey towards a more purposeful and mindful life begins with a single click.